as we get going, Myra, why don't you just talk about some of the things you're going to cover here today at this very important talk about healthcare decision making, some of the topics we're going to cover as we get into.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about one of the few things that we can do to maybe exercise some control in this kind of scary situation. I mean, life is full of uncertainty, and I think the pandemic has created even more uncertainty in our lives. But doing an advance directive is definitely something that allows us to have some measure of control over what we want if we are not able to speak for ourselves. And it can be a period of incapacity or that's temporary or permanent. So we're going to talk a lot about advance directives, what you can do with one, who to appoint, how to choose someone, how to update if you've got someone already appointed that maybe won't work. We're going to talk about patient advocacy. Even in this day, we need patient advocacy even more than ever. It's just hard to get that kind of help now, but we're going to talk about some possibly creative ways to do that.
All right. Well, I think Mike is joining us. He had some tough technical difficulties. So now, on that note, thank you, Myra, for the intro. So I'm Mark Gilfix. I'm an attorney at Gilfix and the Pohl Associates. But this talk is more Myra's domain. We all work together, but she's going to be the one leading this. Mike's going to be co-hosting this. But let me turn it over to attorneys Michael Gilfix and Myra Gerson Gilfix, and we're going to get into our slides as well. I'm going to turn off my camera, but I'll be here in the background. Again, if you have questions, please send them in through the Q&A function at the end of the content. We will answer as many questions as we can, we have a lot to get through, so we're going to go from there. So on that note, let me turn it over to both of you.
Great. So let's go to the slides and have some content as we talk about these topics and make it very practical for everybody to follow. So let's go to the slide presentation here. Okay. All right, so let's start with, it's an obvious observation, that we live in unprecedented times. You know, we've said that in almost every era, but, with what's going on with the stock market, staying at home, disrupted lives, can't visit people in nursing homes, which has just driven us crazy. It is crazy, and it makes us stop and think. And I think when it comes to healthcare decision-making type issues, that's at the fore. I mean, that's our next topic here. And just to acknowledge that most of us are worried. What happens if we become ill? How is it all going to happen? How will our advocate be able to step up and take care of us? So some of the most obvious concerns, issues, we're all thinking about the virus. It probably, given the large number of people, we have a great turnout today. Maybe one of you or two of you have been directly or very indirectly touched by this. Probably so. It's a statistical inevitability. But the same topics come up, and they have come up forever. When there's any severe illness, any event, whether it's an illness like a stroke, other catastrophic medical event, if you're in an accident, these issues constantly come up. We can be in the hospital, not able to communicate, and the issue has come up. And most poignantly, perhaps, when there's life-sustaining treatment decisions that have to be made. So that sort of sets the stage, I think, for the issues that we're concerned about today, that we're going to address with some discussion with you. We should be able to leave a little time for questions, and I think you know how to do that. You can enter them in the chat, and we have a few questions from the last webinar we did on this topic that we'll address. So let me introduce Myra, who was going to really carry the ball for the most part here. This topic has been her main issue for 20 plus years. After graduating Stanford undergrad, she was at Phi Beta Kappa. We all know what that means. Went to Stanford Law School as well. Founder of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. Has written countless articles on the topics that we're going to address today, particularly about patient advocacy. And what does that mean? What does it mean when somebody's appointed? What role do they play? What power do they have? These are very tough, but very practical questions. So Myra has, for years and years and years, been ahead of the curve. She had a circulating information about hand washing before anybody else was thinking about it. It goes back a year, 2 years, 3 years. Details about how to do that. She's written and thought about patient advocacy, given talks at the national level, conferences of attorneys, professional healthcare providers, and many, many others. So, and served as a chaplain, by the way, at Stanford Hospital for a while, ethics committee. So her breadth of experience are just off the charts. So with that, Myra, let's go to one of our first topics, and you can kick us off and just start talking about the first specific document or step that a person should consider.
Yes, the Advance Directive, all of the conditions and situations that Mike described in the previous slide, these are situations that you might find yourself unable to speak for yourself. And what an Advanced Healthcare Directive lets you do are these 3 basic things. Choose an agent, and we're going to talk a lot more about that because it's really important who you choose. It gives you the opportunity to express your wishes, the kind of what if questions. What if I'm in this condition? What do I want? And it should be in accordance with your values, what matters to you, and what kind of quality of life that you hope to stay in before you decide to withdraw treatment. And it gives you the opportunity to make some decisions explicit. You know, if you know that there are some things you don't want, you can express that. If you know that there are some things you do want, you can express it. Next slide.
Yeah, and as Myra begins to think about this and talk with everybody about it, you know, just to emphasize, you can have the best documents in the world. We do them. They are the best. But the people you appoint, if they're going to implement, I mean, that's where the action is. So Myra, let's talk a little bit, please, about the agent and the choices.
Yeah, this is a really important person for you. It doesn't have to be a family member. It can, but it has to be someone who knows. If you have an advance directive already, you need to make sure that the person that you've appointed knows that you've asked them to do this. They need to be willing to serve, willing to talk with you about your wishes, your values, and what you want. They need to understand the responsibility. It is truly a responsibility if it comes to be the situation where you can't speak for yourself and you need decisions made for you. So that person needs to be available. And clearly they need to respect your wishes. If you find out that the person you've appointed doesn't agree, then you need to find someone else. And that person has to be comfortable asserting your wishes. They need to ask questions. They need to be able to comfortably communicate with your healthcare providers. And it's not easy. And especially now, it's really difficult in terms of people being allowed to be with you. They may have to be comfortable with FaceTime, with Zoom, with tele-appointments. So, you know, this is a responsibility, but, you know, most of you probably have someone who can achieve these goals.
And let me add and I hope my audio was coming across well. I had a message that maybe it wasn't. So
it's better now.
Good. I'll try to speak up. On that last slide, you know, 2 other quick points is we have seen situations where you know, mom appointed the loving daughter who just couldn't make the decisions that mom wanted. You know, she said she would in advance, but when it came right down to it, end of life decisions, the daughter couldn't do it. We've seen that on more, and I'm thinking of 2 exact cases where 2 daughters just said they couldn't. So it goes to this very difficult question, point made, that do they really understand what your wishes are, and will they really honor your wishes?
Mike, I'm sorry, I just want to emphasize that, you know, signing an advance directive really is only the first step. Communication, being willing to have these kinds of conversations with your family as well as your agent, your chosen agent, is a gift to them. And it makes it much more likely that what you want will happen and what you don't want won't happen.
And yes, Myra and I did name each other in our respective advance directives to answer the unasked question. We have some pretty good clarity on that. Okay, so what are the kinds of things that you can address in your advance directive? And by listing a few points, this is not meant to be exhaustive. You know, some of us in this community are pretty creative, and every time we think we've seen it all, somebody comes up with some new idea, something they really want to say in their document that kind of floors us, and you know, we draft it. We are here to do your wishes, follow your wishes. So if there's ever anything you want to include in a directive and we're involved, you know, you shouldn't worry that it can or can't be done. You let us know. Our job, or your attorney's job, is to make sure that whatever your wishes are, they're incorporated into your document appropriately. Okay, so what can be addressed? Obviously, end-of-life decisions. And you know, and this should not be, we're not really comfortable with some of the standard simple language that's incorporated into some of the forms. One of the key provisions is, so typically it says something like, I don't want treatment if the benefits don't outweigh the detriments. I mean, it's language like that. So your agent has to weigh things and figure things out. So we tend to be a lot more explicit about those issues if you are comfortable doing that, only if you're comfortable. A lot of folks want to talk about where care is to be provided, which is a real tough one these days. You know, where if you're in a nursing home, nobody can visit. If you're at home, people can visit. Maybe they should or shouldn't with the 6-foot thing, but this is an aberrational time with COVID-19. So you can be explicit, and most of our clients are in their advance directives. You know, I want to be at home. I want to be cared for at home. I don't want to be in a nursing home, or it's okay with me, whatever it may be. Organ donations. Most folks allow that, and if you're thinking you're too old, there's no point. Not true. There are internal connective tissues. One of my favorite lines, by the way, is that a used kidney beats the heck out of no kidney. So, you know, there's still a need. There's a huge need. And disposition of remains. Where would you like to be buried? If burial, if you're to be cremated, where do you want the ashes? And we'll return to this topic, which can actually be very interesting for so many people. With COVID-19, I mean, let's face it, again, with restricted access, difficulty communicating, uncertainty about so many issues, it does present some special challenges. And Myra's going to talk a little bit more about that, excuse me, a little bit more later on, because it is on our minds. So now we'll, excuse me, go to some a few examples of the kinds of things that we've had our clients incorporate into their advanced directives. Myra, would you go through the first one, since you're the singer and the pianist and the family?
Yeah, I love music, and I know that music awakens parts of our brain that, you know, are unreachable. Even, I mean, if we have dementia, even music can reach those parts of our brain. But we have had clients express a desire to have specific kinds of music, and I mean, Mike says he wants no rap, although I'm not sure that's music. Well, I hope I haven't offended anybody, but and we had one client who wanted the music of Marlene Dietrich to be played in her room. It's, you know, again, it's limitless, but it does give your loved ones something that they can do for you as well. And, you know, when you're dying, or if they think you're dying, or if you're in a persistent vegetative state, it's something that they can do that they feel some power to be able to help you.
Good point. And the next topic is actually very interesting. Excluding relatives. So what the heck does that mean? So obviously, if there's a close relative and you don't want that person to be named in the document as your agent, you don't name them. That's sort of obvious. But we have legislation in California that lets you go a step further. It's very, very interesting. In California and 2 or 3 other states, you have the opportunity to actually say that, you know, I have a relative. You don't have to go through all the verbiage, but you basically say, I have these relatives, and not only are they not to be involved, but they are not allowed to go to court. They are denied court jurisdiction. And the reason that's come up a couple of times, and Myra and I have been involved in 2 cases where this happened, where at the 11th hour, when someone was dying and they were about to be let go, Somebody who has maybe been estranged, it's often been a relative estranged, arrives at the 11th hour to save their cousin or save their sister. Often it's religiously motivated, sometimes not, but usually it is. And they have and there's attorneys around who are believers that you should not ever allow someone to pass away. And they go to court and they challenge the decision that was made. So with this legislation in California, if you have somebody who might aggressively disagree with the decision that you have put into writing, we can cut them off at the jurisdictional needs. We can deny them the opportunity to go to court. And if you think that never comes up, I'll tell you, it comes up all the time. Probably about 10 to 15% of our clients name somebody when they have this opportunity. And that's a huge number of people. So it does come up. So prohibited treatments and interventions. It's hard to know what could come up, but sometimes an individual may be diagnosed with a particular disease and they have a sense of what's coming. You know, what are the issues and circumstances that could come up? What are the treatment options? And the one who comes to mind for me most significantly is a friend actually who developed ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is Lou Gehrig's disease, which is really one of the most horrible things. You lose control of all muscles. You're cognitively, you're still okay. So with her, we went through in some detail saying when is life-sustaining treatment to be terminated. But usually it's simpler than that. Some people have a strong aversion to certain treatments for cancer. Some folks, this is not a hint because we know chemotherapy can work, have said in their document, no chemotherapy, no matter what. The most significant, sort of profoundly interesting example, about 2.5 years ago, I drafted an advance directive for a very, very, very well-known engineering professor at Stanford. And in great detail, about 1.5 pages of content, he said that under no circumstances shall any form of anesthesia be used, no matter what. And he knows what that means, and he means it. And his agent is on board. So you can imagine how specific we had to be in honoring those wishes. So again, it makes the point that, you know, these are not a one-size-fits-all document. There's issues you're going to have. Many of us do. So let's go on a little bit more, Myra. A couple other examples.
Yeah, pets, people, especially now, people are adopting pets all over the place, but we care about our pets and they can actually bring a lot of therapeutic benefits. May not be so possible to have a pet in the hospital now, but some people do want to say if the pandemic is over, you know, bring the pets. You also may want to think about talking about the care of your pet if you are incapacitated and who would be doing that.
Yeah, good point. Gee. So we said we would revisit the issue of your ashes and where might they be scattered. And I'll tell you, you know, you got to laugh sometimes. I mean, some of the discussions that we have with clients about where they want their ashes to go, I mean, they're hilarious. So here we are talking about end of life, death, remains, and you're just laughing like hell because some of us are so creative. Okay, a couple of examples. One lady may be listening. She's very involved in the community here. Her ashes are to be scattered at particular corners of 3 department stores at the Stanford Shopping Center. Now, is that legal? We need a lawyer to settle that. Oh, we're lawyers. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's up to her kids to see what they want to do about that. Another gentleman, duck hunting was his life. So his buddies, after he passes away, some of the ashes are to be loaded into shotgun shells, taken to the duck pond that they really own, and shot into the air, maybe not at ducks, but that's where he wants his ashes to go. One of our very wonderful clients up in Marin County, her ashes are to be deposited at the base of a particular tree, a numbered tree in a grove that was purchased by a nonprofit organization. And they're using the money they get for this to preserve the grove, sort of a land preservation kind of thing going on up in Marin County. So again, tremendous creativity here. There's also, by the way, something called green burial that you might have heard of, which is an alternative to regular burial or cremation. It's just going back to the basics. Where
there's also something new about using your ashes or your remains to sustain a tree. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah.
How, but yeah.
Yeah, it goes on and on.
Yeah.
And Myra, religion?
Yeah, people will say, talk to my rabbi. If you're a Jehovah's Witness, no blood donations, no blood products can be used. And, and maybe not just religion, spirituality. Someone actually said, please talk to my psychic counselor before you make any decisions. So this also is a pretty broad area that you can express yourself in.
Yeah, and I hope you're getting the feeling that these are living, breathing documents in so many ways. We change our minds about some things, and we have new and creative ideas. So, and you might also have a document that's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years old, and if you looked at it, you say, "Whoa, did I say that?" So as we talk about these issues, again, just realize that as your life evolves, as you learn more, as you experience more, as you see family members and friends, or if you experience an illness, what went through your head? What did you observe? Is there something that you would want to make a matter of incorporate it somehow into your planning? We usually think about estate planning and all this planning as money and tax and all that, and we do. Of course we do that. But, there are times, obviously, when your advance directive, and this whole topic that we're focusing on today, it dwarfs everything else. So, be creative. Don't settle for simple. Your life isn't simple. So let's not do that with any of the documents that we prepare. So the point of our, we'll close this short discussion by just saying the only limit is your imagination. If you have something unique, throw a party after your passing and something happens. Some folks, by the way, they have their wakes, they have their celebrations of someone's passing while they're living, because they want to hear all the good things that theoretically people are going to say about them so they can enjoy it. Why let it only happen afterward? Think about that. I think that's pretty cool. So use your imaginations, be creative. I don't want to say have fun with this document, but don't look at it as something staid and depressing. Death happens. Illnesses happen. Let's just accept the reality and make it as good as we possibly can for ourselves. And I think Myra mentioned earlier that when you sign one of these documents and include some information, it is a gift to your family. The more they can do for you, I thought that point that Myra made about the music, I hadn't thought about that giving them some music to play, it's something they can do, because everybody wants to do something. But what can you do? So that's like another form of a gift to your family members and to the agent. Okay, so let's move on now and talk about the role of the patient advocate, which again, Myra has written so much about and given so many talks about. So Myra, please lead us on this.
Yeah, the role, a patient advocate is someone that is with you during your journey, whether it's, for a healthcare emergency or a chronic condition. It's someone to help you prevent needing your advance directive, meaning that, your advance directive really comes into play when you can't speak for yourself. So a patient advocate is with you before that event, because you can still speak for yourself, but you need some help. We all need some help. And I'm telling you, even with my sort of sophistication, when I was told that I might have breast cancer, I got scared. And I called a friend in to listen to the doctor with me. So the patient advocate, it could be a friend, it could be a family member. And it, obviously, if you've chosen someone to be your agent under an advance directive, that person is likely someone you trust and could be your advocate, but it doesn't have to be. So, as we say, typically the person named in your advance directive could be your advocate. But that person can take notes, can ask questions, can assert and defend what you want. And, now it's hard, but I strongly still believe everyone needs an advocate. And if that means phoning in, with FaceTime when you're with a doctor and your loved one needs help and support, you can still be there at that appointment, even if you can't be physically present. So I think it's really, really important for every one of us to avail ourselves of someone who's willing to help in this way.
And before we go to the next slide, you know, on this being creative when the physical presence is not possible, we thought about this a lot at the very, very beginning of the pandemic, when nursing homes were shutting down and visiting became harder and harder. What do you do about being in touch with your loved one, and how do you monitor care, or what can you do to increase the visibility of your loved one who might be in a facility? And one of the things that we thought of was to advise our clients. A lot of, if any of you are on our mailing list, you got this note. One of the things we suggested was that you have meals or desserts delivered to the staff members at the facility where your loved one is. So they know that you sent it. They know who your parent is or your loved one is, so they can go say thank you. It makes your loved one a little bit more visible, and you know, it can't hurt. It can't hurt, and those folks deserve some the best special handling we could give them anyway. So again, it was just an example of trying to be creative and trying to do something. Okay, now let's get a little bit more specific about COVID, and again, Myra, let's have you lead us through this.
Yeah, you know, clearly we've been harping on this, but confirm that you have someone available to speak for you, and make sure that that person is comfortable, because they're probably going to have to be communicating, you know, by phone, by FaceTime, by Zoom. And yes, you should definitely communicate with your family what you would want. I think we discussed this a little further, because with COVID, you know, things are evolving. More is being learned every day. And so that's another reason to keep discussing it. As you learn more things, as you learn more possibilities, you're going to want to communicate what you would want or not want. So I think we're talking about that a little more later here. So I will.
And Myra, what, you know, is again, this idea of discussing with the family, it can be hard for people to begin that discussion. A lot of folks are uncomfortable. Do you have any suggestions about, I don't know, how to open the conversation or anything along those lines?
Well, if you have an advance directive, clearly you can use that as an outline. And if you don't have an advance directive, you may bring that up with your family. You know, maybe some of them have an advance directive. You know, you don't have to be the one talking about your own wishes. You can say, do you guys have wishes? You know, what would you like me to know? But there's just this is probably an easier time to talk about these issues because of the pandemic. It's on people's minds, you know, what's going to happen. And, you know, and the same thing that people are still suffering from other events, heart attacks, strokes. They're still having those things happen, and it's harder now in the hospital to get care, or people are worried about going to the hospital. Actually, one thing I do want to point out is that, you know, healthcare providers are urging people not to wait if they have symptoms that seem urgent. So, you know, that's just an aside.
Yeah.
But those things are always with us. So even if you're not worried about COVID specifically, there may be other issues that you want to discuss. And this is a good time to bring them all up, because everyone's in the same boat in a way. Because, you know, people who are in their 20s should be talking about what happens if they're diagnosed with COVID.
So that's a good segue to the next topic, which is being safe in the hospital. And boy, and Myra has written and talked about this for so many years, I just can't tell you. So let's do a summary here.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in normal times, you have to worry about hand washing, even in the hospital. Now, at least people are much more aware of the importance of keeping things clean and disinfected. You know, all of the things that happen in healthcare every day, unfortunately, are still with us. Duplicative testing, not testing where there's no beneficial outcome. Actually, I read something recently where doctors were talking about the fact that having more and more cases of COVID has made them more aware of not doing testing that wouldn't contribute to a treatment outcome. So in other words, why test for something unless it's going to give you information about a different, about treatment. So there are some benefits of this pandemic. And of course, monitoring drug intake is also, and I'll actually talk about that more when we talk about ventilator care, because there are some specific issues with COVID. But I think, Mike, you were going to talk about something else there that.
Well, just about the tie.
Yeah.
I should say this is a Myra story, frankly, but I like to talk about it. When she was once in the hospital for something where everything worked out just fine, she called attention. A physician comes over, right, and wasn't wearing a tie, and she complimented him because ties carry germs. I mean, if you think about it for a millisecond, that's true. The thing, oh, here it is. I mean, it's hanging out. As they're testing and they're doing this, and some of these docs wore the same tie all day long. I mean, it's crazy if you think about it. So again, it's a simple illustration of awareness.
Sleeves. He had a sleeveless shirt, short sleeve shirt.
Same point. So these things matter. All right. So now let's look at ventilators, and let's talk a little bit about this. And as the next topic introduces, is it rational to question the use of ventilators, or is it contrarian? And we'll move along the slide. Watch this.
Okay, well, I've been trying to keep up with the articles about ventilators, and things have changed from the beginning when people have been intubated and put on ventilators very quickly. And by very quickly, I mean there's probably many of you are aware that one of the measures of I don't want to call it an emergency, but oxygen saturation rate. They put something on your finger and you can tell how well your blood is carrying oxygen. Normal is 95% or above. And so these people, COVID causes lung damage. So people are being monitored, and when their oxygen saturation rate goes lower, then doctors were worried that they needed to prevent the patient from going into cardiac arrest or coding. So they would intubate and ventilate fairly soon. And by fairly soon, I mean they would be below 95%, they'd be below 90%. But some people could be talking and not showing any difficulty breathing when their oxygen saturation rate was as low as 70%, which is really, really low. And so they started thinking, maybe we don't need to ventilate. Maybe we can provide oxygen short of that by, just oxygen mask, BPAP, other methods, and other, actually turning people over on their bellies. Well, the patient actually would have to be able to do that, but that's called proning. And it would improve the oxygen saturation rate. It's hard to talk. But, so doctors are not as quick to intubate and ventilate, but still, and that's something that I think, your agent should ask about, or you should ask about. Do I really need to be on a ventilator? A lot of people in assisted living and nursing homes are saying they don't even want to go to the hospital, which is a reasonable judgment, because 50 to 80% of people who are ventilated don't survive. And the people who do survive are left often with lasting cognitive impairment. And what I'm learning now is that, the delirium is what causes that lasting cognitive impairment. And there are a lot of things now that doctors can do to prevent the delirium. So, having someone advocate for you and ask, and one of the things is that even if you do end up on a ventilator, it's really important that doctors give you a chance to get off. And that's asking a lot for some doctors who aren't aware of this, but if you can get up and moving, then your risk of lasting cognitive damage is much less. So there are things that can be done to prevent some of the severe lasting problems. But it is reasonable to say, I don't want ventilator care no matter what. It's also reasonable to say, I do want ventilator care, but use whatever protocols you can to get me off it as soon as possible.
Which again is the role of the agent.
Right.
Because you're
right.
probably not able to communicate. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, some people are able to communicate until their oxygen sat rate goes to 25%. So, wow. So if somebody's, jumping the gun, maybe you could say, could you give me a trial on the BPAP, or, could I turn over?
Okay, and you've raised this question, so let's talk about this for just a moment. Many have said that hospitals are dangerous places. You get infections there, and it's very common for folks in their advance directives, when we raise this question, to say, I want to die at home. I want to be cared for at home. DNR, that comes up all the time. But the tougher question again is, where are you going to be when you're very ill? And Myra has often pointed out that once you get into the hospital, if you're facing death within a relatively short period of time, it's hard to just be sent home. I mean, that just doesn't usually happen. So, being aware of all of these things, and sometimes not going to the hospital in the first place. These are easy to chat about, very hard to implement, especially when family members are trying to help you and do the right thing, and they may know what you want, but they have hope. And we all know how really complicated this is. So it raises this question about your agent respecting your wishes. Yes, we are repetitive on this point, because so often we see mom or dad name a kid for a logical set of reasons, but they didn't have that discussion to see if their child was going to really honor their wishes, understand their wishes, and be advocates for their wishes. So it's tough. If mom wants to be at home and the doctor says, oh, your mom needs to be in the hospital, what do you do? I mean, that's a hard question. So it's getting information. Very few of us are going to get the level of knowledge and sophistication that Myra gets, because she reads medical. I've heard her grill doctors and make them cower, because she's read the studies that they haven't read. So she's rare in many ways, many wonderful ways. But it's a point that we all have to really think about. And I don't know that one other point I do want to make in this context is something that's rarely talked about. It's the cost. It's the cost of being in the hospital. There was a great series of articles in the Mercury called "The Cost of Dying." And the author talked about her own judgments that she made on behalf of her father, 3 times interventions to keep him going longer. And she later concluded she shouldn't have allowed any of them. And the interesting thing she did was in the column, she had the price tag. She had the dollar figure for how much each of those interventions cost. And so many of us would say, especially if you don't have a large estate, I don't want 20, 30, 40% of my estate to go out the window to take care of me in my last week or 2 weeks of life. So cost of care isn't going to be the factor. That's not what we're advocating at all. But in real life, cost of care is a factor. Doctors don't like to think about it. They don't want to talk about it. They want to do the right thing. We understand that. But again, reality intervenes, and cost is. So many of our clients have had to say in their document, cost is relevant to decision making. It's logical once you think about it, and it's tough. Here we go. It's tough again. Okay, letters of guidance and how you can supplement what you've written in your advance directive. Particularly if you did use a simple form where there's not a lot of content. Forgive us, our documents, some of tend to be 12, 14, 18 pages long, single space, because there's so much content that we think needs to be in there. A lot of folks have special provisions that they want to include, issues they want to address. Okay, so the idea of a letter of guidance that has most typically come up, by the way, when there's parents of a child with a disability, and after the parents are gone, somebody else is going to be taking care of their child, managing a special needs trust. And we always advocate a letter where the parent should say, look, this is about my kid. This is what he enjoys, he doesn't enjoy. how to make him happy, where to get food for him, whatever it may be. So similarly here, a letter of guidance, it's any term you like, it's supplemental information. Maybe it's something that you just thought of. You might have learned something from this chat that we're having that you'd want your agent to think about, but you don't want to go back and amend your document. So the important thing, again, is that your agent and your providers are aware of what the content may be, and consistency. If you say something in your letter and in some writing that's inconsistent with the terms of your advance directive, obviously you've created a problem. You would like to think, and I would like to think, that the most recent writing controls, and it probably would, but you don't know that for sure. So being careful about consistency. The extent to which your agent, family members, patient advocate will rely on it, it's really hard to say, because again, your advance directive is the key document. That needs to have the key provisions that are going to guide the agent. But we all know life, again, is more complicated than that. So the letter, again, making sure it's consistent with other things, just supplements. It can be remarkably useful, especially when unexpected events come up, to have some of your life philosophy in it, for example. You just don't know what might be in there. Last point on this is related a little bit different. An issue that comes up from time to time on the part of doctors, where they say, they want to know what the patient wants. Here's the advance directive, but the advance directive is 15, 20 years old. And they say, logically, they say, look, I understand that this is the legal document, but how do I know this patient still believes this way? When you're vibrant and fit and so forth, and you're doing your document, it's one thing. As time moves along, your views might change. So it's not an irrelevant point. So the simple trick or tool that we suggest you use, if you signed that advance directive more than 5 years ago, read it. If it still reflects your wishes, you don't have to sign a new one. Take out a piece of paper and you say, I just reviewed the terms of my advance directive. It still reflects my wishes. Signed, dated, staple it or tape it to your advance directive. It'll address this staleness issue that can sometimes impede healthcare decision-making. Okay, Myra, action steps now.
Well, you've covered a lot. So let's review. What do we need to do? If you haven't already, an advance directive. If you have, definitely review it. Modify and update it. As Mike said, if it's more than a couple of years old, do what he suggested. Confirm again that your agent is available and willing, and that it's the person that you still want to act for you. Make sure that your regular physician gets a copy of your advance directive, and prepare that letter of guidance. I think it's really helpful. And it may not be something that the agent wants to share with the doctor, because they're the one who has to make the decision, but it is valuable for them to do a guilt-free job of speaking for you in a medical situation.
Thank you. So we've covered certainly at the highest level the issues that we see people wrestling with and addressing on a daily basis. We're not in the medical world, but we certainly touch it very directly with the work that we do. We're planning documents, helping you think in advance about how you want things handled. So to give it context, now the advance directive deals, obviously, as we've said, and with healthcare decision making. There's 3 documents that everybody must have, and we assume you're aware of this, but let's keep it real simple. If you have any assets at all, a revocable living trust and a durable power of attorney. They're essential for everybody once you're an adult, and most listening are probably well into adulthood. So it's Avenidas. So, making sure that you have a trust, that it's up to date, not just a will. That's far too simple. That's a mistake. Doing and these things fit together. One of the most obvious ways is where you want to have a party thrown after your passing, and it's in your advance directive, but the money's got to come from somewhere. So you would say in your trust, it's okay, the agent, I want you to spend money for the party. So these things really fit together. The tax planning, making sure that someone can always act for you. Confirming, as Myra has said, and again, we do hammer on these points. Are the people And all three of these documents willing to serve. The person you might choose to be your advocate for healthcare decision making is somebody who's going to be a good advocate in the healthcare setting. That might not be the same person you would name in your trust or power of attorney, because there you're dealing with the finances or the business of life. So again, often it's the same person in all these documents, often not. So to talk that through and make sure that you have the right documents and the right people empowered to take care of things for you. Okay, just fundamental. So as we come to a close here, by the way, we have kind of a simple offer for you, and then we have a couple of minutes for some questions. Obviously we do review existing documents, and what we're doing for those of you who are listening, if you just have a couple of questions and you just don't know, just leave it, keep it that broad. We can set up a free 15-minute chat with you. Have your questions ready to go, and that'll be with one of our attorneys. So we will be available to you. We will not charge. Just a 15-minute chat. Again, most of you have one or two questions. So in a moment, we'll give you our email address and our phone number, and we're pretty active with Avenidas, or easy to find us. So, do that. Take advantage of it. We love to reach out and help folks. So please do that. And let's show there's the contact information if you would like to do that. And let's leave that up there. A couple of questions that I saw come in. Let me respond to them, and we'll see if others came into Mark. Okay. One of them is, does your advance directive have to be notarized? And it doesn't. There's two ways your advance directive can go into effect. One is it can be notarized, or you can have two witnesses. And the witness can't be the person you name in the document. It really can't be your doctor. They wouldn't do it anyway. So two witnesses are fine. If somebody is a resident of a nursing home, by the way, there's a special requirement, which is that a nursing home ombudsman must be one of the witnesses, and there's a special process you have to go through. And another question was, can my doctor be my healthcare agent? Well, maybe if your sister is your doctor, or your sister is a doctor, but those are different roles. So no, you really wouldn't have your and they wouldn't do it anyway. So it's really got to be somebody, again, who would become your advocate. Mark, are there any others that came in? I have one more, but
yeah. So there's some good questions. So one is, to what extent are medical professionals required to respect a patient's wishes or the issues outlined in their advance directive?
Ooh. Myra?
That's really, really hard to enforce.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to be willing, the agent would have to be willing to sue the healthcare provider. Or I think the best option is, if there's a real serious issue and there's time to resolve it, you ask for an ethics committee hearing.
Yeah.
But generally, healthcare providers do want to do what people want. I mean, unless it's a matter of, feudal care or something outlandish that's being asked for, that isn't medically reasonable.
Yeah.
But in terms of withdrawing care, if the situation arises that you can't speak for yourself, and it's clearly a treatment that wouldn't be good for you. I mean, providers are very good about usually honoring those kinds of wishes.
Right.
Yeah,
that's a great question. Go on.
Yeah, and we just had questions about how to set up these other documents and the decisions to be made for the trust and the power of attorney. And one thing I want to point out is we did a webinar a couple of weeks ago on the other documents we talked about, the living trust, the power of attorney, and how these all fit together. So that is available online, and we can send you a link. And when you contact us via Ashley or Lynn at our front desk, they can send you a direct link to that first webinar. We posted it on YouTube. So if you want to watch the first webinar we did on general estate planning issues, you can get that link. And we're doing other webinars going forward. In, I think, a week, we're doing one on protecting your assets in the face of long-term care and multi-generational planning. So we do have other talks, and this will be posted online after it's done. So we encourage you to share it. We'll try to get a link out to everybody. So we encourage you to share this with anyone who you think could benefit from this, because this is such a critical topic and hardly anyone knows about this. You guys are all so far ahead of the game just by being here. So that's I'm glad that you guys were all able to attend. Other questions you see, Mike, or any that you want to go over?
Well, another one actually came in reference to what I said about the cost of care and how you can find out what the cost is going to be in advance. Good luck.
Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, hospitals often don't, because it's a combination of insurance. What will Medicare cover? Does the hospital take what's called Medicare assignment, the Medicare established rates? Will Medicare approve? On and on. I do not remember which hospital. I actually saw an advertisement where they said that they would give you a cost estimate for a procedure in advance for a visit and so forth. My hat's off to whatever provider that was. I'm sorry, I can't remember which one it was, but we're starting to see some action in that area because people go bankrupt.
I actually subscribe to a newsletter that's called Cost of Care. And it was started by medical professionals who are very aware of this problem. And that sort of tells us that it is a serious problem. But at least some people are beginning to address it. And it is perfectly reasonable to want to know in advance what the cost of certain types of care is. But, as Mike said, it is very, very difficult.
Yeah, and another couple question, and then after this question, maybe we will wrap things up. But one question, this is kind of two parts. So one, how can we make sure that our advance directive is followed? Like, how do we get copies to the right people? What do we do logistically? And what happens if you arrive to an emergency room without an advance directive? Will they just try to save you? Maybe, so two parts. So what do we do logistically to get the document to the right people and have it in the right place? And then two, what happens if you don't have it there? And maybe just briefly go over the difference between a post and advance directive, Myra.
Yeah. So one thing that you can do is post, a copy of your advance directive, magnetize it to your refrigerator, because that's where emergency personnel are going to go. However, if you are, say, probably within a year of possibly dying, are we? Oh yeah, sorry. Then a post physician orders life-sustaining treatment. Sorry, it's called something different in other states, but in California it's called a post. It's a medical order that people can sign indicating what treatment, if any, they want if they're in an emergency situation. It could be a do not resuscitate order, it could be a comfort care. It's something that you have to do with a healthcare provider, a doctor usually. In California, I think now nurse practitioners can do this. But you don't do this unless you have a chronic illness or a terminal diagnosis and you're likely to die within a year. And you can't, an attorney can't do it for you. You have to do it in connection with a healthcare provider. And if you don't have the ability to speak for yourself, if you've done an advance directive, your agent can talk to a healthcare provider to get these kinds of medical orders for you that will carry out the wishes that are in your advance directive. So that is a way to make sure that your end-of-life wishes are carried out, whether you have the ability to speak for yourself or your agent is speaking for you with the medical provider.
And on the ER room, by the way, I mean, if you get to the ER, their job is to keep you going, is to resuscitate. Yeah, they're not going to sit and talk. If you're in a crisis.
But if you have the do not resuscitate order in the post, they can check for that. That's about the only thing they can.
Yeah, so on that note, I think we're going to wrap things up. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We weren't able to get to every question. We want to be respectful of your time. But again, we offer this 15-minute free chat. If you want to talk about this, let me get that slide back up. Sorry, I got a little bit, here we go. So here's the contact information. If you want to reach out to us, we would love to chat with you, offering a complimentary 15-minute call. If you're already part of our client community and you want to revisit your documents you did with us, now's a great time. We are serving people via Zoom videos, Zoom meetings, and phone meetings. And if you work with someone else, that's fine. Update your documents with them too. But we are here as a resource. We're happy to chat with you. And I want to thank Michael and Myra for leading this talk, and we want to thank the Avenidas team for getting the word out and for giving us the opportunity to reach out to everyone. These are obviously scary times, but we will get through this, and we are here, and I feel so fortunate to have Myra, my mom, in my life. She's been extraordinary for me personally, and I've seen her help so many close family friends and so many of our clients when they face these issues. And for existing clients, by the way, when you work with our office, Myra does become available for free consultations if you are dealing with a hospital stay. She's helped out many of our existing clients at no cost, just to say, what do we do? You know, my dad has surgery. How do we make sure that he's safe? Or my brother is not doing well. How can we make sure we're standing up for him? So anyway, again, thank you, Mike and Myra, so much. Thank you to the Avenidas team, to Tracy, McLeod, who helped us set this up. But if you want to contact us, please do, but stay safe, social distance, everyone. Let's keep masks on outside. Let's keep each other safe. And on that note, I want to thank everybody. And we're going to end there. But again, thank you so much. If you have follow-up questions, you know how to reach us. Take care.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Myra.